With the recent deaths of Renee Good and Alex Preddy during ICE-related enforcement operations in Minneapolis, you'd be right to assume that this has been a deadly year for federal immigration enforcement. But it's actually worse than you thought. Because those two deaths, high profile and shocking as they were, are just the most visible part of a much larger crisis. One made of deaths that rarely make headlines, and in some cases, don't count at all. In 2025 alone, 32 people died in the custody of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, a number that matched a record set more than 20 years ago. There were no emergency addresses, no sweeping reforms, no immediate resignations, just figures, buried in reports and labeled under critical headlines like natural causes or medical distress. But those labels are deceptive, as many of these people didn't simply die in custody. Many of these were predictable and manageable deaths that were allowed due to willful negligence. And today, we're going to take a look at some of those that didn't make the headlines. Before we jump into that, though, we need to look at some ICE stats. Between 2024 and the end of 2025, ICE detention has expanded considerably. The detained population surged from roughly 40,000 people to nearly 70,000 in under a year. That kind of growth typically requires additional hospitals, doctors, redundancy, and oversight. But that's not quite what we've seen. No, instead, what expanded fastest were tent camps, private contracts, and emergency transfers. And essentially what happened is when admissions spiked, so did the number of deaths, and sharply at that. By 2025, the death rate in ICE custody has increased nearly 400% compared to just 2 years earlier, implication that we're looking at a structural breakdown. So let's take a look at how these operational deficiencies claim the lives of several immigrants that you'd likely never hear their names via traditional media. Okay, so before I get too deep into this, I do want to say that if I butcher any of these names, I deeply apologize. The death of Marie Blaise provides a detailed case study in how systemic transfer fatigue and medical apathy lead to fatal outcomes. Marie, a 44-year-old Haitian national with no criminal history, died on April 25, 2025 at the Broward Transitional Center in Pompano Beach, Florida. Her journey through the immigration system illustrates the physical toll taken on detainees who are moved through multiple facilities in short order, a practice that often results in the fragmentation of medical records and the interruption of treatment for chronic conditions. Marie was apprehended on February 12, 2025 in St. Croix and was subsequently moved through facilities in Puerto Rico and Louisiana before reaching Florida on April 5th. During her 10-week detention, she was diagnosed with severe hypertension and chronic kidney disease. ICE records suggest a narrative of noncompliance, claiming that Marie refused her blood pressure medication 9 times during her stay in Louisiana. However, this narrative is contested by testimony from her family and other detainees, which suggests that the refusal may have been a consequence of the patient's deteriorating state or lack of clear communication regarding the purpose of the medication. The testimony of Rosa, a Honduran woman detained in a nearby cell, is critical to understanding the unseen nature of this tragedy. Rosa reported that the guards initially ignored the screams of other detainees as Marie collapsed. When an officer finally approached, he looked at the unresponsive woman and walked away without intervening. This delay in emergency response is a recurrent theme in custodial deaths, reflecting a culture of skepticism where detainees' medical complaints are treated as inconveniences rather than emergencies. The Broward County medical examiner ruled the death natural due to cardiovascular disease, but the failure to address documented chest pains over the preceding month suggests that the death was, in the words of human rights advocates, senseless and preventable. While many deaths are attributed to natural causes, the emergence of tent cities as detention solutions has introduced more direct forms of violence. Camp East Montana, a sprawling makeshift facility established at the Fort Bliss military base in El Paso, Texas, has become a focal point for allegations of physical abuse and administrative negligence. The most egregious incident at this facility was the death of Geraldo Campos, a 55-year-old Cuban national, on January 3rd of 2026. The official story regarding Campos' death underwent several significant revisions. Initially, the Department of Homeland Security claimed that he died after experiencing medical distress while in solitary confinement. Following investigative reports from local media, the agency changed its account, alleging that Lunas Campos had attempted suicide and that guards had violently struggled with him while trying to save his life. However, the autopsy report released on January 21, 2026 by the El Paso County Medical Examiner ruled the death a homicide, specifically citing asphyxia due to neck and torso compression. Further forensic evidence also revealed the following. Oh, and real quick, I am not a doctor, so if I happen to butcher any of this, please forgive me. But the results found petechial hemorrhages in the eyelids and neck skin, indicating burst capillaries consistent with strangulation or heavy pressure on the torso. Abrasions on the chest and knees, suggesting a violent struggle where the victim was pinned to the ground. There are also eyewitness accounts from another detainee, Santos Flores, who stated that he saw at least 5 guards pinning Mr. Campos down, and that he could be heard shouting, "I can't breathe," before losing consciousness, something that sounds eerily familiar. The ruling of homicide in a federal detention center is exceptionally rare and points to a breakdown in the training and supervision of the contract guards employed at the facility. Earlier inspections in September of 2025 had already warned that Camp East Montana failed to provide instructions on the justified use of lethal force and lacked policies for monitoring mentally vulnerable detainees. Mr. Campos, who suffered from bipolar disorder and anxiety, was reportedly in line for his medication when the fatal altercation began, highlighting how a failure to manage mental health leads directly to physical violence. A significant portion of the unseen victims in the immigration system are those who belong to non-Spanish speaking linguistic groups. These individuals often face a double isolation, in that they are removed from their communities and then placed in a system where they cannot communicate their basic needs or medical symptoms to their captors. The death of Chaofeng, a 32-year-old Chinese national at the Moshannon Valley Processing Center in Pennsylvania on August 5, 2025, serves as a grim reminder of this vulnerability. Xi was in ICE custody for only 5 days before he was found hanging in a shower stall. While ICE and Pennsylvania State Police initially characterized the death as a standard suicide, a private autopsy obtained by the family's lawyer revealed that Xi had been found hog-tied with his wrists and ankles bound together behind his back with bedsheet linens. A further analysis of the Xi case reveals several layers of institutional failure. First is the language barrier. Xi only spoke Mandarin and was unable to communicate with any staff members in the facility. His attorney noted that his inability to speak English or Spanish caused him great distress. Yet no efforts were made to provide translation services or bridge the communication gap. The second concern is the overuse of physical restraint. The discovery of the body in a hog-tied position suggests that staff responded to Xi's distress or lack of communication with physical force rather than psychiatric intervention. And then another issue is just the general denial of oversight. Following Xi's death, Pennsylvania Congresswoman Summer Lee and Mary Gay Scanlon were denied access to the facility for a routine inspection by DHS Secretary Kirstie Nolan, a move that critics argue was intended to prevent an independent review of the conditions leading to the death. Xi's death is emblematic of a broader trend where Chinese nationals are increasingly targeted in enforcement sweeps and then subjected to dehumanizing treatment due to perceived national security risks. The lack of Mandarin-speaking staff in rural detention centers like Moshannon Valley creates a silent cell effect, where detainees are unable to seek help until their situation reaches a point of total desperation. The official death toll of immigration enforcement is frequently contested by advocacy groups who argue that ICE utilizes deathbed releases to avoid public accountability. This practice involves releasing an individual from custody only when it's clear that they will die imminently, thereby ensuring that the death does not occur in custody and does not trigger a federal investigation or a public death report. The ACLU filed suit against ICE in October 2021 regarding the non-disclosure of these deaths, citing instances where individuals were rushed to hospitals from detention centers and were then released just before they were pronounced dead. This administrative sleight of hand is facilitated by the erosion of the DHS Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties. In 2025, the administration significantly reduced the funding and staffing of this office, leaving it with only a handful of employees to investigate hundreds of allegations of civil rights violations. Now, I also want to go over just a few general factors that are contributing to accountability gaps. The first is a monopolization of investigations by the FBI. So, for example, the decision by the FBI to take exclusive control over investigations of shootings, as seen in the Renee Good case, prevents local law enforcement and state bureaus, such as the Minnesota BCA, from conducting transparent and independent reviews. Then, of course, there's for-profit secrecy. So private contractors like the Geo Group, which I covered in another video, often operate with less transparency than federal facilities. They use their status as private entities to shield internal medical records from Freedom of Information Act requests. And then finally, it's just the general use of excessive propaganda. So agencies using terms like career criminal or aggravated felon in death announcements is more or less designed to minimize public sympathy and suggest that the decedent's history justified the conditions of their confinement, even when the crimes are minor or occurred decades ago. To wrap up this video in general, I want to say that the record-breaking number of deaths in ICE custody between 2024 and 2026 is not just an accidental byproduct of a high-volume system. It's the logical result of an enforcement strategy that treats medical oversight as a secondary concern to deportation quotas. The analysis of unseen victims, from the linguistic isolation of Chaofeng to the physical homicide of Geraldo Campos, reveals a system that is fundamentally unequipped to handle the humanitarian needs of its population. As the detained population reaches historic highs, the agency has prioritized the construction of makeshift tent camps and the recruitment of tactical units over the hiring of medical staff and the implementation of cultural competency programs. The current trajectory suggests that without a massive reinvestment in oversight and return to humanitarian discretion for the elderly and ill, the immigration detention system will continue to be a site of preventable tragedy. The deaths of individuals like Marie Blaise are not merely statistics. They are indictments of a system that has allowed the mechanics of enforcement to supersede the constitutional and human rights of the individuals within its care. But alright, that's it for this video. Remember, we live in the stories we tell ourselves. Till next time, Vermilion out.